Oh, hello, YouTube friends, and welcome back to TBL, the podcast. That's This Baker Life, and I am Chris Baker. We are talking this week all about imposter syndrome. If you're somebody who's had a new career start and you are feeling a little bit like you don't belong, well, first of all, you're not alone. And second of all, you're wrong. You do belong. And we're going to talk all about how to deal with imposter syndrome right now. Let's go. All right, welcome to the This Baker Life podcast. Very excited to have you back. This is episode number 2, and no guest this week, but we do have a hot topic for you right now in the business world, the motivation world, and it's this: imposter syndrome. We have been seeing over the last 2 or 3 years the great, as they call it, resignation. And as part of the great resignation, most people have either gone to working from home or not working at all, taking some time for themselves after COVID to figure out what their life is going to be like, to figure out what they want to do. And now we're seeing the reverse side of it. Still a pretty heavy job market out there, in that there's a lot of jobs that are out there right now. A lot of times they're in the trades. There's other positions that are a bit lower, that are the ones that need to really be filled right now, and there's a big labor shortage there. But in some of the higher up positions and some of the management positions and some of the positions of sort of a higher level in organizations, there's not as many of those today because people are starting to move back into the workforce from taking a couple of years off. The problem is, many of you are feeling like imposters now, like you perhaps didn't learn anything over the last couple of years or didn't keep your knowledge or whatever. And this is apparently something that's become more and more common. I've read a few articles about this over the last couple of weeks, and they're kind of interesting to see how you can kind of mentally sort of no longer believe in yourself, to kind of feel like you're going to be found out as no longer the expert, that you've been gone for 2 years, or for some of you, you might be taking on roles you've never been a part of before. It's a whole new career for you. And because of that, maybe that makes you feel like you're going to end up being found out as somebody who is not the expert in their field. This is apparently a common thing. 82% of people, 82% of the workforce at some point in their career feel the imposter phenomenon. They feel like they are the ones that are struggling with a sense that they haven't earned their position in the world, that they haven't achieved and are a fraud, that nothing that they've done before really matters, and that maybe somebody who's watching or somebody who's keeping an eye on them, or even a boss, doesn't believe they know what they're doing. And the problem with this is it's started to really increase anxiety. The amount of generalized anxiety disorder that's out there right now is understandable, because when people are taking on new careers and they feel like they've got this imposter syndrome now, that they're going to be found out, that they're no longer experts, or that they're not experts at all, they're starting to really experience increased anxiety, increased depression, less risk-taking is happening. And sometimes, if people are taking you as a new person in this role, this is an elevation of your career, that's because somebody has put trust in you that you might bring something different to that level. And what I think is really important here, I want to bring my experience in, because what I think is really important here is understanding that that's likely what's happening. If you're somebody in a new role that you've never really done before, but somebody took a chance on you, somebody hired you for that role or contracted you for that role, they're doing it because they want you to be different from somebody else, different from the way they used to do things. we're in a really great position right now in most businesses. Most businesses are taking new technological steps in their business. They're taking new approaches to social media and content. I can tell you this from a fact. We are BHB TV. We are a streaming platform in the mortgage industry. And one of the things that is really, really cool about that is everybody seems to be sort of following, and please apologize for that text, but everybody seems to be changing. Everybody seems to be moving into that new media, into that rich media, into that video world. And that's not to say that's your role. I understand that your role might be completely different from that. Maybe you're taking on accounting versus marketing, and you're this is your new thing, or vice versa, and that's fine too. But it means they're looking for you to do something a little bit different than anybody else that's been in this role, because that's why they've chosen you as a newer person with some experience in the background, but maybe not experience as this new manager or this new even higher level, or whatever it is. Or maybe it's a newly created role. In my past, I used to work for one of Canada's largest insurance companies, and I took on a role. I had gotten my life insurance license with one of Canada's biggest banks / insurance companies as well, and was managing an insurance branch. Now, one of the things about this insurance branch was that we had to recruit our own life insurance advisors, essentially. But really, I was only recruiting 2 or 3 of them. But I also had some recruiting in the past for hard to sell things like non-prime mortgages. Back in the non-prime mortgage days, I worked for a subprime company at that time, and we had to sell 12 and 13% first mortgages at a time when a first mortgage was typically 5%. So I had to recruit really good salespeople in to be able to do that, to be able to have that conversation with a client. So I got lots of recruiting experience, but never in the insurance field really, other than when I went to this insurance company for a year. So 1 year in, I'm talking to probably one of the greatest leaders I've ever worked for, and she was talking to me about a sales role initially. And we got talking about this other role that she had called National Recruiting Manager. And it was a brand new role. And it was a little bit of selling the career, selling the financial advisor career. And it was baffling to me that at the end of our conversation, she said, "I know you want this role about developing sales programs and whatever else it was. But I actually think, based on your recruiting experience of salespeople and a recruiting of some insurance salespeople, that you actually could do this role. We're looking for somebody to revamp the entire advisor recruiting process, and we don't want to do it the way we did it before. So we think that you could take some of your success recruiting people into hard to sell products and create a process, and then create a role itself, essentially, that hadn't been worked in before, to actually execute on brand new recruiting things." Well, holy cow, was I excited. I thought, this is great. I've been in sales forever. I've been in financial sales forever. Yes, I've done this recruiting. I mean, in talking to her, it was very clear that I had done a lot of different ways of recruiting people to get top salespeople, including referrals and things like that, into the business. And all of a sudden, it hit me that this was something so new that I didn't know if I would ever be able to do it. And I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. Now, thankfully, in that case, I had a leader who was very encouraging of just bring out the things that you did before and break it down into what was working, what didn't, what have you tried, what didn't work, what worked. And that was genius. I mean, that was genius. That is exactly how I was able to start to overcome that imposter syndrome. But boy, oh boy, I'm sitting there and I'm accepting this role, and I'm thinking, I'm excited about it. And I get there the first day. And how many of you have done this? Those of you with imposter syndrome, you get there the first day, and people start using jargon that you have no idea. And it's recruiting, it's sourcing, selecting, onboarding, things like that was what I was hearing. And they were more like HRE terms, right? And that wasn't really what I was doing. I was doing it inadvertently. I didn't know what I didn't have definitions. I didn't have words for it. And then I did now all of a sudden. That took me about 3 days to pick up. So that wasn't a big issue, but it was on the first day. And the first day I was like, well, sourcing. Oh, okay. Recruit. Okay. Selection. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Right. But at the same time, I'm going, boy, if these people already know what sourcing, selecting, and onboarding are, how in the world am I going to do this? How in the world am I going to be the expert? I'm the national recruiting manager, and I don't know these words currently. I'm learning them today. Well, this leader, Kathy, who's again one of the best that I've ever worked for, talked about how we expect you to get into the role and then be kind of an expert in the role after 2 years. You don't have to do it, 1 week in. But I felt like I had to, because it was national recruiting. I had to go and convince recruiting managers across all of Canada from coast to coast that what I was telling them and teaching them was the right way to recruit, and everything that they've been doing is something they need to change. Not that it was wrong, but it was something that they need to change or try or do differently. So how was I going to do that and prove that I was the expert? And this ongoing fear is experienced by, and I'm going to say something that's going to make me sound a little cocky right now, and I don't mean to, but typically this is experienced by high achievers. This is typically an experience by if you're experiencing this, it's because you're used to high achievement, right? I was a top salesperson, top sales manager, top. Always wanted to achieve the best, always wanted to be the best. And so imposter syndrome tends to affect people that want to be the best because they're actually anxious about the fact that they might not be, right? They're anxious about the fact that somebody might detect that they're not the best yet. So this is kind of a phenomenon, a syndrome, an experience that people go through, and it is a strange experience. But if you're going through it, just understand that you're not alone. If 82% of all workers eventually experience some sort of imposter syndrome, you are certainly not alone. And so if you're a top performer, usually in whatever it is you're doing, it doesn't have to be sales, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're a top performer, this is typically why you're feeling this. So you should feel good about yourself being that top performer first and foremost. Second of all, you should feel good that you want to be the best still. I mean, that is another big thing. Feel good about the fact that you got that new role, especially if it's a new role that you haven't done before. But even if it is, and you still feel the imposter syndrome, feel good about that role was yours for a reason. You're not an imposter, right? So it's about feeling good to try and get over this. But the other thing is, everything has to be lived by day. Okay. You can't think about the future. If you're thinking 2 weeks down the road, you're thinking wrong. It's really the case of you have to do it, Dave. What can I do today that makes me the expert in what I'm doing? And don't worry about tomorrow yet. What activities can I do today from the moment I start work to the moment I shut down for the day that will help me grow, help my role be a success, help. That is what you're needing to look for. Okay. And only for the next 8 hours. Let's say you work an 8-hour day, even if it's a 12-hour day, only for the next 12 hours. Okay. Because part of your imposter syndrome fear is going to conferences, meeting people that might have more smarts than you, meeting others down the road in the future. There's somebody's going to detect that I am an imposter. But if you stop worrying about any other day than today, then that's one good way to fight your imposter syndrome. There's other ways to conquer imposter feelings for sure. I saw in an article role plays. How many of you out there hate role play? I mean, that's not going to help you do anything. I don't remember the last time that a role play activity actually helped me, in whether that be in sales training or any other area, because it's not a true feeling. It's not a true sense of what is happening, right? And especially in something like this. So there's lots of different strategies. I found that there's 7 basic strategies. I saw an article about this, and I'll probably bastardize it a little bit, but at the same time, I think you can benefit from this. And the first thing is learn the facts. Learn the facts about your job. Learn the facts about your career. Learn the facts about what's expected of you. Make sure you understand the job description and what is expected of you. And then see how you can kind of branch out and make it your own. If you can find a way to learn the facts about what your position is or what it is that's making you feel like an imposter, and then make it your own, you're going to be much more ready for what comes next, because you are going to design it for yourself. And when you design it for yourself, you're the expert. There's a reason other people don't have this role and that you got it, right? So you're going to design it for yourself. The other thing is share your feelings about this. I don't care if it's a spouse. I don't care if it's your boss. I don't care if it's a colleague, although sometimes, as we know, in workplaces, people are like, oh, that person feels fake. They think they're fake. Maybe I can take their role. Here we go. So be a little careful there. But definitely people you trust. Share it with your parents, share it with your spouse, share it with whoever it is that you trust, to share these feelings of the imposter syndrome. Understand that, because I'll tell you one thing that's going to happen. One thing that's going to happen is people are going to tell you stories of when they felt the same way, and you're going to feel much better. So if you're feeling that, that is something you need to really do. Talk to people, share your feelings. Doesn't have to be a professional, as I said. It just could be friends, family, just somebody you trust, though, because you don't want somebody starting rumors that you don't know what you're doing. That kind of thing. Even though they're wrong, you do know what you're doing. If you give the impression that you think you don't know what you're doing to the wrong person, we all know where that can go. We've all seen social media. Well, the other thing is, the first time you have success, celebrate it. I think one of the things that was great about that national recruiting role is they were kind of already halfway down the road of developing a new selection process, talking about behavioral interviews, how to source people, all of these different things. And I was able to contribute a lot to how I did behavioral interviewing, how I selected people out of sort of a generalized interview into a behavioral interview. I was able to really contribute to that project. And so when that project was finished, even though I was only part of half of it, I felt a lot better about the fact that I contributed, and I contributed early in this role. And I was able to articulate it to people. Right. Obviously, I'm educated in radio and television broadcasting. I have no issue with getting in front of people at any time, doing it right now, even though it's digital and on YouTube. But I was able to do that pretty comfortably, and able to sort of teach what was in that developed selection process back to other people. And so internally, I was celebrating that. Internally, I was celebrating the success of something I contributed to already in my new role. You need to do that too. If you're feeling imposter syndrome, celebrate the little successes. What was your success today? Do it every single day. Same thing as I talked about earlier. If you're planning out your day, you're worrying about your 8 hours or 12 hours or whatever kind of schedule you work, find something in that day you can celebrate. Maybe you learned a new thing about the role. Maybe you contributed something someone else didn't know. Maybe, whatever it is, fine, because there's always something. Do not tell me there's a day where you did not find there isn't something good that happened to you. Even if it was a generalized bad day, find the something good and celebrate it. If you do that, you're going to feel a lot better from your imposter syndrome. The next thing is kind of even harder to do, especially for people who are top performers. And that's perfectionism. Most top performers that I've ever met in any sales role and any other kind of role, management, whatever it is, most top performers are perfectionists. And that's a lot of where imposter syndrome comes from. Perfectionism. So learn to try to drop the perfectionism. Again, when you go back to that celebrating one thing that happened today, that's a great way to sort of feed that perfectionism a little bit, right? If that's the one thing I wanted to achieve today and I can celebrate that, great. And that helps to feed that perfectionism need for you. And that's one way to kind of drop perfectionism as well, is to not be perfect the entire day, but celebrate the good things that did happen, right? So they kind of tie in hand. Self-compassion, feel good, feel okay about yourself. Be compassionate about the fact that you feel like you're in a different role and it's new, right? Don't feel like I'm in a different role and I shouldn't have taken it and they're going to scrutinize my resume and I'm going to be gone in 2 weeks and this and that and the other thing. I've heard all these stories. Don't even worry about those stories. Do not worry about those stories. Those are not going to happen to you. What you need to do is be compassionate toward yourself, understand you're feeling something new, understand you're feeling something has changed because it has. You're in a new role or you're in something that you feel is so new to you that you might be exposed as some type of imposter, and feel okay. Try to take deep breaths, try to meditate, go for a walk. It's one of the best things, best self-care, compassionate things you can do for yourself. If you get an hour lunch, go for a walk. Outside, in the park, I don't care where it is, go for a walk. You're going to feel 100 times better when you come back. So if you start to get those imposter feelings, just remind yourself that your accomplishments aren't tied to your value. Your accomplishments are things you achieve by completing tasks and doing them well, which is something you've always done, right? Which means you aren't an imposter. You're an expert. Okay. So this is where you have to really, really start to be compassionate. You also need to share your failures. Understand that failure is part of every day. And this is the second last one. I want you to stay with me to the end of this podcast. Okay. This is a big one. People are going to fail. If you think about baseball, and I hate to use a sports analogy because I know not everybody's into sports, but I have to because it's the one I know. And the big thing is, in baseball, somebody who has a 300, 310, 325 batting average, and they do it as a career, is likely going to go to the Hall of Fame. And the Hall of Fame means they were one of the best that ever did it. But 325 average means that almost 70% of the time, they failed. So what you have to do is lean into failure. If you're feeling this imposter syndrome, lean into your failures. If you've been asked to bring something new to a role and something doesn't work, guess what? That's what they expected to happen. Same role that I'm talking about from before, the same exact role. We brought in a applicant tracking system, and I won't say the name because I don't want to get sued, because we didn't like it all that much. I mean, it really, basically from coast to coast, people didn't like to be tracked, number one, and that's okay. That's new to them. I wouldn't call that the failure. We needed that tracking as part of the new recruiting process. But the tool itself was really hard, and we tried to jam in our processes into the tool. So it was actually kind of our fault anyway. And I think that was part of the failure. We should have pushed other departments that were using other ways of doing things into the new ways that tool was able to do it, rather than try to fit a square peg into a round hole. And I'll admit that as a somewhat failure in that time frame. The tool was right. The way we did it was wrong. Just because we didn't make everybody kind of conform to the way it would have, and it would have worked more smoothly if we could have. But that being said, that part of it being a failure, there were lots of successes with that particular applicant tracking system, but there were those failures where we were trying to jam a process into that system that didn't really fit the functions of the system itself. That's going to happen. Lean into your failures. Fail forward. Fail forward. Think about all the stuff that I probably learned from that. Anytime we looked at a system in the future, whether it was a sourcing system like using LinkedIn or whatever, or whether we used a website like Talent Egg, everything that we did when we did that was based upon, is this going to work better than when we implemented that applicant tracking system? And it did. It did, because of all the things we learned. So not only sharing your failures, but it's learning from your failures. Fail forward. Right. And you'll do just fine. And lastly, before we end this whole thing today, learn to accept that you're going to be different in this role. Accept that you are the one they selected. You are the one that should be doing this. Recognize you have the talent, And by the way, by the time you're day 10 of this new role, guess what? You're more of an expert than anybody around you because you've been doing it all day, every day for 10 straight days, and they haven't. Whoever they is that's making you feel like an imposter, or maybe it's not even people, maybe it's still your own head. Start to think about and tell yourself, you've been doing this for 10 days. You're more of an expert than anyone else in this now. So even if you're brand new to a role, you're no longer an imposter. And learning to accept that is absolute key. Absolute key. Self-acceptance and accepting the role is in fact yours, that you are in fact best for it, and that you can do and make the change that you need to make in that role that makes sense for you. So just to quickly recap before we drop out of this particular podcast episode, thank you for watching and getting this far, by the way. Let's recap it. Learn the facts about your new role, what they expect, get into that job description, figure it out, and then figure out how you can make it your own. That's so important, is to figure out how to make it your own. Once you've done that, make sure you share your feelings. If you're feeling imposter syndrome, share them with somebody you trust, in particular, somebody you trust. Most likely, again, you'll hear of somebody else who went through it, and you'll be able to talk about it, and maybe even how they coped beyond what I've told you here today. Celebrate your successes. Every time there's a success, I don't care if it's got to be daily. What did you succeed at today? Honestly, you do that for 2 weeks and you're going to feel a lot better about your imposter syndrome. A lot better. Celebrate those daily successes. Let go of perfectionism. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to be perfect, but if you're a high achiever, oftentimes you are a perfectionist. And because of that, that's going to be something you're going to have to work with and change and manage. And so try to let go of that perfectionism. Look for those things that were successes so that you can, and again, as we said, that ties into the last one, celebrate your successes. Look for those things that were successes and understand that you did that perfectly. And there's your, feed that perfectionism with that. And don't worry about the other things. Cultivate your self-compassion. Be good to yourself. Go for a walk, do things differently, do things that help you mentally, right? A little bit of exercise is often the one that will do that. Fail forward, share your failures, learn from your failures. It will make you even more of an expert, not an imposter. Failing at it's not going to make you an imposter. You're learning, and you're learning more than others would have, right? Failures are just learning. I always tell my baseball team, 11U, they're 11-year-olds. We win or we learn. We win or we learn. We don't fail because technically the failure is the learning, right? So we win or we learn and we have fun and we learn the game of baseball, right? That's you. You're not failing, you're learning. And so lean into those quote unquote failures and understand that you're going to do things differently because of them. And then accept that you may or may not have this imposter syndrome, but also accept that you are good at what you're doing, that no one else can do it. And by 10 days or even shorter than that, you're already way more of an expert than anyone else who even applied for the role because they didn't get it and they aren't doing it. So you are the expert, and that makes you not an imposter. Thanks for watching This Baker Life this week. We've got guests coming up in the coming weeks, but we've got some great topics just like this one. Stay tuned, like and subscribe to the This Baker Life channel for more of these types of podcasts and all sorts of different content that we like to put on to help motivate you, inspire you. And hey, we call it This Baker Life for a reason. I live it, you live it. Let's live it together. That's This Baker Life. Thanks for watching this week.